Howdy folks, and welcome back to Newegg TV. My name is Paul. Today I'm going to be doing an unboxing and overview of this new motherboard from Gigabyte's G1-Killer series. This is the G1-Sniper Z87. We shall begin by taking a gander at the retail box. So first off, this is designed for Intel's 4th generation core processors. They're codenamed Haswell. It uses the socket 1150 socket, which means it's not backwards compatible with 2nd generation or 3rd generation Intel core processors. Those are known as Sandy Bridge and Ivy Bridge, respectively. So only purchase this motherboard if you're also going to be purchasing or installing a Haswell processor. Okay, that being said, down here at the bottom we have some nice details about some of the elements that Gigabyte has integrated onto this board. Gigabyte Amp Up audio is their new thing that they've been doing with their motherboards this time around, which provides a swappable op amp, so you can actually add on op amps to change the tone of your sound. It's powered by the Creative Soundcore 3D sound chip integrated onto the board. You also get an integrated Killer E2200 networking chip on board, and you're also privy to the Killer E2200 networking software, which can help with packet prioritization to help your games be prioritized with their packets and make sure you don't have any conflicts with other people downloading stuff otherwhere, that sort of thing. You also have Nichicon high-end audio capacitors, gold-plated audio jacks going along with that high-end audio equipment that they've installed on this board. Also a USB DAC up, which is specifically a USB port that's designed specifically with only data connections, or it can be configured in that way, which is basically going to be a more ideal solution if you're going to be plugging in an external DAC or digital to audio converter, or sorry, digital to analog converter. So if you are purchasing that, then you have a special USB port just for it. Also throughout the board they're using durable black solid capacitors, so you're going to have a really long lifespan on the board, and that goes along with all of the other high-end, high-quality components that they've integrated onto this board. So here's a look at the back of the box, a little bit more information on the Gigabyte Amp Up audio over here. Again, it's just a little chip on the board that you can swap in and out. They'll give you little tongs that you can use to pull that out with. Also, you have, what is this? Audio noise guard, I'm sorry. So path lighting, which goes along the motherboard, which lights up kind of in green, which gives it a pretty cool look, but also separates the audio components from the rest of the board. I'm going to talk about all this stuff once we get into the box. So ESD protection, port protection on the I/O. There's a little bit more info on that Soundcore 3D chip. Nichicon high-end audio capacitors, again the green ones. Killer E2200. You get two-way graphics support, so you can do two-way SLI and two-way crossfire configurations by way of the X16 ports that are Pci Express X16 ports on the board. And then down here at the bottom, we actually have a full list of detailed specifications, which I am not going to read off for you, but you can read if you are interested, because I'm, again, going to be talking about all this stuff when we get into the box. Apart from that, on the top right, we have a little bit more information about that USB DAC up. So here's a little chart that can show you the noise that's generated by the USB power with a typical USB port. And by using that USB DAC up power, it's basically going to give you clean power for less noise interference, which is particularly useful in an audio environment. So clean, low noise power for your digital to analog converter. They've also used gold-plated connectors at several key points along the board, such as your audio jacks, your DisplayPort and HDMI, which are digital, but hey, they're gold anyway, as well as a gold-plated coaxial port. They've also given you 15-micron gold-plated CPU socket, and then some quick buttons located on the board. I'll point these out in just a moment as well for easy power on reset and clear Cmos. And that about does it. I guess you also have a layout of the I/O here at the center, but again, I'm going to point you all those in just a sec. So let's move on into the box. Inside the retail box, we have a fine assortment of accessories. Here is a driver and software disk, which you should download the latest drivers from the Gigabyte website, so you can use that to get yourself up and running on the internet. Here's an SLI bridge. It is a ribbon-style cable, so you can use this for the spacing that is provided on the motherboard if you're going to go with a two-way SLI configuration. Crossfire bridges are usually included with crossfire-capable video cards, and with the newest AMD cards, they're actually not even required anymore. Gigabyte case badge, if you like case badges. Then we also have some manuals right here. So the full manual here in English, as well as a multilingual installation guidebook if English is not your first language. I'm sure that is very helpful. And then in here you get cool stuff like the layout of the board, a block diagram, which I'm always very fond of, that Gigabyte likes to put those in, as well as a list of all of the items that are integrated onto the motherboard. I'll be cheating off of that as I go over the board in just a few moments. Here are your serial ATA cables. They've given you a total of 4. 2 of them have right angle plugs on one end, and 2 of them have straight plugs on both ends. And all 4 of them are going to be SATA revision 1, 2, or 3 compatible. And they also have the little metal clasps that help hold them in place nice and stably. Here's your G1-Killer I/O shield, so it is black. It's got the G1-Killer logo on it, and it has clear labeling of all of your ports, so you can tell what is what. So here's the motherboard itself, and is keeping with the color scheme of the G1-Killer series. It is black and green, which is very suitable if you're going to go with an NVIDIA solution, NVIDIA video cards, which typically have a green color scheme, although there is no reason that you might not install an AMD card in this board just as well. It's of course compatible with both. But apart from the black and the green, a few other silver highlights kind of scattered throughout, such as on the G1-Killer and Gigabyte logos up there. The board itself is a nice matte black finish. So there's a look at the back of it. Very clean look to this board. I really like what Gigabyte has done with their black PCB motherboards recently, because they do look really nice. And then the heat sinks up here are held on by some plastic push pins. So bear that in mind if you are going to be removing those, but you do have a couple Phillips head screws down there at the bottom. Now if you have been following the Gigabyte G1-Killer line at all for this generation, you might notice that there's a few G1-Killer series motherboards available. For instance, this is the G1-Sniper Z87. There's also a G1-Sniper M5, which is a micro ATX board, and then there's a G1-Sniper G1-Sniper 5, which is also Z87, which is a much higher end board. So you're going to notice a lot of visual characteristics that these share. One of the biggest difference between this board and the G1-Sniper 5 is that the G1-Sniper 5 is really set up for high-end gaming configuration. So you have a 4-way SLI or crossfire by way of 4 Pci Express slots right there, and it's got a PLX chip that's also integrated. So this one is geared more towards folks who are building slightly more reasonable systems when it comes to budget and video card configurations. There's a few other differences between them that I will try to point out as I move along here. You also don't get the liquid cooling capabilities for the power delivery up there, and the power delivery on this board is not quite as beefy as the overclocking designed G1-Sniper 5. Okay, let me point out the fans, and then we'll do a close-up look at the board. For fan headers, you get a total of 4. Single CPU fan header, 4-pin, all the way up there at the top. The rest are also all 4-pin. You get one that is located right here. Wait, I almost lost it. Right there about dead center, so great for an exhaust fan at the back. And then 2 more down here along the bottom for front or bottom intake fans. Honestly, you can plug those in however you want, but that's probably what they're going to be plugged in based on their layout. Taking a close look at the board, we'll start down here in the bottom right. First off, you got a column header right down in the lower right corner. You also have a clear Cmos jumper right there, although the jumper is not there, so you'll need to grab one and connect it. You can also just use the button, which is probably a little bit easier. Here's your front panel connectors. They're color-coded in this little block. They've also got a little guide down there below it, so you can save yourself the trouble of going into the motherboard manual. We mentioned this board has dual BIOS, and those are the 2 BIOS chips right there with the little blue dots on them, and the switches for those are located elsewhere. But there are BIOS LEDs beneath them, as you can see, and that will tell you which BIOS you're currently accessing. To the left of that, you have a couple USB 2.0 ports. Each of those will handle a couple USB 2.0 plugs, front or rear panel. System fan header, those are the other 2 that I mentioned at the beginning. And then over here on the left, you have your audio front panel connection point right there. And then you also have that Soundcore 3D chip right there with a bit of electromagnetic shielding on it. You can also see a little bit of that green LED path lighting, which starts right here, continues right up here, and goes up the side of the board. And again, there's green LEDs, so that's kind of a see-through bit of the board that you can see, which looks pretty cool when it's actually lit up. And that also provides some separation here between the this area, or that plane of the, here, let me continue to use my pen. This plane of the motherboard over here, and your audio componentry over here, so that's going to help to reduce any interference that you might experience. There are these audio capacitors, again, that they've integrated onto the board. And then you got a couple switches here. These are actually gain switches for the built-in amplifier. So there's simply a left and right channel switch, and position 1 will give you 2.5x amplification, and position 2 will give you 6x amplification. Above that, you have your swappable op-amp chip. I mentioned when I was talking about the box that you get a little chip grabber thing with this. That was my mistake. That actually comes with the G1-Sniper 5. But still, you can find those just about any hardware store, or these aren't too difficult to get out otherwise. Or if you buy the upgrade kit from Gigabyte with a swappable op-amp, you can use that to swap that in. Again, different op-amps will have a different effect on the sound and the tone of your onboard audio, and by providing that one, Gigabyte has sort of given you a way to change, modify, or upgrade, depending on how you look at it, your audio profile. depending on what you most like. Let's talk about the PCI Express area, all the slots that you can see right here. First off, some smaller and or legacy slots. So PCI Express X1, one right there, one right there, one right there. Those are all PCI Express Gen 2. You also have a couple legacy PCI slots that Gigabyte has added on down here at the bottom. So if you have some older PCI cards that you're still carrying over from an old build, and you still get a lot of use out of them, you still have compatibility. The main event is going to be your green slots right here. These are full-length X16 slots. These are wired up directly to the to the socket LGA 1150 socket. So for your Haswell processor, you're going to get direct control over these. PCI Express Gen 3, and since you have 16 lanes from a Haswell processor, you can do X16 on the top one, or you can do by 8 and by 8 if you're going with a two-way configuration. And again, both AMD Crossfire and NVIDIA SLI two-way configurations are supported. Moving on to the right, we have a G1-Killer logo over our Z87 chipset heatsink, which looks pretty cool. Here, I'll angle it slightly so you guys can get some cool lighting on that. All right, that's controlling quite a few things on the board, but the thing I like to talk about most is going to be your serial ATA. So let me rotate the board. These are right angle serial ATA ports. And the cool thing about Z87 is these are all SATA revision 3, 6 gigabit per second capable. So plug in your SSDs to your heart's content. RAID configurations are also supported, so RAID 0, 1, 5, and 10 are configured. But please bear in mind, if you do have a stack of SSDs and you're planning on connecting like 4 or 5 or more up to this and doing a crazy RAID configuration, you do have some bandwidth limitations there. So just bear in mind, beyond 2 or even 3, you're going to start to see a bit of bottlenecking occur, and in that case you'd probably want to opt for an add-on RAID card, because that's why they have add-on RAID cards. But you do have that capability, of course, and plugging in all of your drives to that will give you plenty of options. Also, one of the differences between the G1-Sniper 5 is that they've given you some additional SATA Rev 3, so if you need more storage, the G1-Sniper 5 might be a better option. Here's a front USB panel connector, so 20-pin connector right there for front USB. Moving up the side of the board, you have a 24-pin main motherboard power connector right here. And to the left of that, you have a couple switches. The top one here, SB, I must assume stands for single BIOS, but this is basically the switch to turn it from single BIOS mode to dual BIOS mode, so you can enable or disable that functionality. And then the lower switch right here is actually to switch between the two different BIOSes. So if you want to set up one with a overclock profile, for example, and one with a stock profile, then you can use this physical switch on the board to jump back and forth between those fairly easily. Moving on, we have a power switch, surface mounted right there, which I always like to have for an outside of the box build, for example. You have a surface mounted debug LED, and these are, you hope that you don't have to use this, but when you do, you're very, very grateful that it does. It will go through a bunch of postcodes while your system is booting up, and if you're having any difficulties, you can reference those codes with the manual to give you a much, much better idea of where the problem might be, whether it's memory or your video card or your boot device or something like that. A couple more surface mounted buttons up here. Here's your clear Cmos buttons, so that one's probably a bit more easy to use than the jumpers down at the bottom, and a reset switch, which goes hand in hand with the power switch. Let's talk about DDR3, or your memory slots that you have right here. Haswell is still supporting dual channel memory configurations, so definitely buy a matched pair of memory will be most ideal. They are color coded, so you want to either populate both of the greens or both of the blacks, or all 4 of them if you're going for 4 memory modules. It supports 1.5 volt DDR3 DIMMs. You can do up to 32 gigs of system memory in this, and the cool thing about Haswell is that it supports overclock speeds, or it officially supports speeds of 1600, and then Haswell reportedly, and in my experience, has been doing a fantastic job with memory, so overclocking 2400, 2666, and beyond, although again that's going to vary greatly depending on the memory as well as on the Haswell chip that you actually get, because not all of them are going to overclock equally. Up to 8 gigs per DIMM, so again up to 32 gigs total, and you have Intel XMP compatibility, so you can easily plug in the XMP profile and get your memory running at its rated speed. To the left of that, you have your 1150 socket, which is still maintaining the same size and layout as socket 1155 or 1156, so you can carry over heat sinks, or if you already have one that you really like, it will still slot in if it's compatible with 1155 or 1156. It will be compatible with socket 1150. Just make sure you have enough cooling capacity for the processor itself. The processors, of course, are Intel 4th generation core processors, and just make sure it's a Haswell, make sure it's socket 1150, and it will be compatible. Beyond that, you have power delivery, of course, for the CPU itself. I can angle this slightly so you can get a better look at some of the chokes on there, for example, as well as the black Nichicon capacitors that are next to that. And you also have a couple heat sinks, again with some black, silver, and green color scheming going on, and that's helping keep those MOSFETs cooled down because those tend to be the hottest part of your power delivery. And from what I have heard so far from our friends at Gigabyte, this board is a very good overclocker as well. Typically with Haswell, most of the boards are pretty good overclockers, but this one is no different. Finally up here, for the front of the board at least, you have your ATX 12-volt supplemental CPU power connector, so that's an 8-pin. Route that cable over from your power supply and plug it in. Finally, we'll finish with the I/O, and that's over on this side of the board. So you've got a legacy Ps2 port right there, so that is a combo port for a mouse or a keyboard, so if you have an older mouse or a keyboard, you can plug it in and continue to use it. A couple USB 2.0 ports above that. Here's your digital coaxial cable, which is gold-plated, and you also have some gold-plated video outs. Remember, with Haswell, you have an integrated GPU that's part of the CPU. So if you're not going to be plugging in a discrete graphics card, or at least not right off the bat, you can use these video outs. You get an HDMI as well as a display port. Here is your gold-plated DAC up connection. So again, this will work as a basic USB port, but it's really recommended to reserve this in case you do purchase a DAC or digital to analog converter. And again, that's going to be the ideal port to plug that into. 4 more USB 3.0 ports right there, and these are natively controlled by the Z87 chipset, so that means that you're going to be very, very nice performers, and it also means you can do stuff like plugging in a mouse and keyboard and actually using them in your BIOS, even though it's USB 3, which is pretty cool. There's your Qualcomm Atheros 2200 NIC, killer NIC I should say, so that's your RJ 45 port for your wired internet connection. And lastly, you have your analog connection points here for your integrated Soundcore 3D audio, and if you're wondering how you might tell what's what, that is greatly simplified when you actually have this connected with the I/O shield. So there you can see the top left one is the mic. You also have front and rear outs as well as your subwoofer, and the lower right one is actually the op amp output, so you can use that for headphones or speakers, but that is the one that will be affected by swapping out that op amp. And then you also get a an SPDIF out in the form of a Toslink connector on the lower left. And that is going to wrap it up for this video, guys. Once again, we've been taking a closer look at the Gigabyte G1-Sniper Z87 motherboard, featuring the Z87 chipset and the 1150 socket for Intel's 4th generation core processors. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful or entertaining, go ahead and leave me some feedback in the feedback section down below. You can click the like button, or you can leave me a comment in the comment section. I will read it and I will take it to heart. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.